Hello and welcome to one of my last videos in this series on my home gym and climbing wall build. In this particular video we see the main construction of the climbing wall. Since my last video I have done a few extra things in the gym which I didn't get a chance to record. I did finish painting the walls and the ceiling, and also I did install an extractor fan which you can see up in the top corner. The extractor fan was an inline extractor fan. It was one of the highest air capacity extractor fans that I could find, but unfortunately it was also very loud. When I plugged it in, it did sound like an aeroplane taking off, so I made a soundproof box for it to go in and put it up in the corner with the anticipation that behind the climbing wall I'd also include some baffles for sound dampening as well, and that does actually work quite well, fortunately. And I have that wired in with an isolator switch so I can switch it on and off when I want to. The climbing wall itself, which you've just seen, I did at several different angles. So the section we've just seen was the 40-degree angle section, and the section we're now looking at on the right hand side was a 20-degree angle section, and then there'll be a section at the back which was a 10-degree angle section. I decided to have the three different angles on the wall to provide different levels of challenge, but also to be able to use different types of holds which are more suited for overhung, so ranging from quite juggy type holds to more crimpy, much smaller holds on the lesser angles as well, just to provide different levels of challenge. I had thought about creating a climbing wall that was on a runner that could be altered in terms of angle, but actually I found that was probably a little bit too complicated to try and get right. So decided to create these three different angles, almost like a climbing wall cave. The main 40-degree angle, I used some quite substantial end rails for the either side, which were 220mm by 45mm thick rails, and then the rails in between were 150mm by 45mm. The 20-degree angle wall on the right was a 150 millimeter by 45mm sections, and then the section at the back was using 100mm by 45mm sections as well. I used the different sizes of wood depending on how overhung the wall was, just for structural support. When I was doing the climbing wall, I realised that there was actually quite a lot of space behind the climbing walls and not being utilised for anything. I hadn't planned for anything, so I decided to utilise that space as some storage space. So I created some shelving to go behind the wall. The main panels themselves that I was putting up on the wall were 18mm structural ply. What I did to create the panels was to stack three of them and then drill the holes through for the I was going to use some T-nut bolts in the back of them, but I decided to use some screw-in ones instead. But each of those holes has a screw-in 10mm T-nut on there, and I think in total it's around about 2,600-ish holes and T-nuts, and each T-nut required 3 screws, so it took quite a long time to do the actual boarding out. I used spacings of around about 120mm between the climbing hold holes for the holds to go on, and I wanted it reasonably tight packed to give the greatest amount of variation of positioning for the holds. Personally, I climb between V5 to V7, so having a little bit of leeway in where I can put the holes. I didn't want them too sparsely spread out. I also at some point want to make this like a splatter board where I can just chuck on hundreds of holds and just climb much more freely. But I haven't built up my collection much so far, so they're a little bit more sparsely laid out at the moment in a more sort of symmetrical pattern. Now the walls themselves, I decided, great, but I also thought, well, I want to use this as a gym. I want the floor space to be able to be usable if I'm not using it as a climbing wall. So although I did end up putting padding down underneath the wall, actually most of that is currently stored away behind the wall as I'm using it more as a free weight area. But because I wanted it as a more open space, I didn't want to create the angles too close to the floor. So my kickboard at the bottom was almost a complete sheet of 4 foot by 8 foot. So you're looking at sort of like 120 centimeters, 1,200 millimeters off the ground before the angle of the wall starts. This means that actually the first few moves are not quite as overhung, they're much more vertical, which makes them a little bit easier, but it gives a bit more walking space around a wall, opens it up a lot more. But I did utilize the roof space. So on the ceiling, I made a section where I could bolt holds onto the ceiling and, essentially do it like a cave. So you can climb up and over and around and make the climbs as long as or as difficult as you want them to be, but still having sufficient space underneath that I can, put in a rowing machine there. I can do some deadlifts and all sorts of floor-based exercises. I decided to put 40mm rubber matting throughout the whole level of the gym and then put on the climbing mats on top. And that meant if I put the climbing mats away that I could actually utilize the space for something other than climbing. The lighting that we're just seeing going up here, I put in some strip LED lights around the top and some IKEA wireless controlled downlighters in the corners. I was undecided initially about how to do the corners, but I decided to keep them as open for space and storage as much as possible. I can actually stack some things up in those corners when I'm not using the climbing wall. And the lighting really helps to create a nice airy, spacious feel. Here you see the last few cuts going in. This is one of the few things actually that I did design fully before I started doing it. I wanted to make sure I got all the angles correct, given that the roof itself has a pitch to it. I had to take that into account when doing all the various cuts and angles, but it did end up fitting very well, very snugly. In this next bit, we actually see it finished and painted. I didn't get any videos of doing the painting or the finishing, but you get to see it in its full finished state there. I did include a set of monkey bars that I constructed out of lengths of steel tubing, and also the railings for the steps and the stairs. So yeah, I'll include a couple of videos later on that show the more sort of finished product outside and inside. So do stay tuned and like and subscribe to get more videos. Thank you very much for watching.